I found that I have aphantasia. I'm actually not sure if that's aphantasia or aphantasia. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I found I have aphantasia. Sounds better. The inability to picture things in your mind's eye. Do you have any thoughts on this condition, evolutionary or otherwise?
Well, so
inability to picture things in your mind's eye. I've heard of this before, and I always lose the concept afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about it though, because
I do too.
The fact is, I don't have this condition at all, but when I try to picture things in my mind, it's not like looking at them, right? Mm-hmm. It's a partial thing. And I'm even pretty good at this. I can take a complex object and rotate it, mm-hmm. Do things like that. Sometimes I can build a mechanism and kind of run it and see if it would actually work, in my opinion, or not. Oh,
like what kind of mechanism? Because that first one is just like the classic, men are better at this than women are.
Right.
Like, 3D movement of 3D objects in space.
Yeah. No, if I wanted to, if we were in the field and I needed to build something to solve some problem, right? Mm-hmm. A pulley driven system or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't have the materials that I wanted, for example, I could sort of think through what it would look like, and I could run the twine through the pulleys and get a sense for how much tension there would be and whether I think they're likely to break.
And you might be, you actually might be less likely than I would, for instance, to want to draw it out.
Yeah, I've done that. It's mm-hmm. not that effective. I'm better at conjuring it. But my point is, when I do that, which I'm able to
draw it out on a piece of paper, I mean.
Right. Mm-hmm. If I conjure it in my mind and I try to look at it, mm-hmm. I don't see a picture of it exactly. Mm. It's not held that way. So I guess what I'm saying is...
That's interesting. Whereas I totally do. Like you were like pulley system. I'm like, okay, there we go. Got it.
All right.
And you're going to start including things like, got to change that. Oh, that one's bigger. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Mm. So when I do that, it looks more like the way things are in dreams, which I described in one of the recent week's podcasts as only partially rendered. Right.
Yeah, you did. And I think that this is going to be a place where some brains are very different. I think I end up with stills from dreams that seem totally rendered to the edges of consciousness. Mm. But they're like hyper rendered. I don't know my art history well enough to identify the types of art, but some art from some periods in history is just so elaborate, like Rococo, and just ridiculous levels of detail, or posters of the rainforest. Like, this is the rainforest. It's got a jaguar and a monkey and a porcupine. Like, it's so everything there.
It's not surreal. It's not hyper real. It's get real. Because the rainforest doesn't look like that.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you're saying that it's more like, it's like an XKCD comic.
It is like that XKCD comic. It's also the case, like if I try to conjure a face of somebody that I know really well, like mm-hmm. yours, for example, mm-hmm. hard to do in the abstract, mm-hmm. right? It's hard to do it from memory. So anyway, I guess the point is you do want to know what normal looks like, or given your hypothesis, what the range of normal looks like before you figure out what the condition you have and how different it is from, because you may be expecting something that's just not simply what everybody experiences.
And okay, I mean, this is the thing that actually gets us canceled, but
oh God.
You and I have conversations like this, like we've never had that particular conversation before, but which reveal how very different our brains are. And frankly, the shorthand that we use to describe this particular difference, long before we ever ran into the psychological description that many psychologists think is ridiculous and should never be uttered aloud, was that you are much more auditory and I am much more visual. That was the language that we used. And then we would see in our students, again, long before we ran into this, so like visual, auditory, kinesthetic, learning styles, stuff that, some psychologists think is accurate, and some say if you think that, you're a moron and you've just proved that you don't know what you're doing. I know that my brain is very different from yours, and some of it is exactly in this area where, when you say, well, dreams aren't fully rendered, I'm like, well, I think mine are. right? Or, oh, well, when I see things in my head, but I don't really, I don't see them as visuals. I'm like, oh, I do. And, this accounts for, I have it much less now, but I used to be able to just say things backwards, right? Because I see the words in my head as I, not so much now because I'm doing so much talking all the time, but used to be whenever I was thinking about a word, it's because I saw it. And so it was perfectly easy to read it backwards as forwards. And to you, in this way, I would say, in this way, you're a normie. Like, what is that? Like, why would you how can you do that? And how is it that the words are showing up for you? So I don't quite understand why so many psychologists seem eager to dismiss this kind of difference as, pop psych, clearly bunk, when many of the same people are willing to talk about neurodiversity.
Well, I have to say, I both resonate with it. Right. When I read something, I hear it.
Right.
Right.
And I certainly don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know that that's real.
Yeah.
I don't think of myself as auditory and not visual.
Right.
Right. I don't think that's how it works. Is there a priority for the auditory? Probably.
Right.
But anyway, I guess the point is, until you describe it correctly, you would expect people to reject it. They falsify it too easily because the proper response is something like, there's an important piece of truth there, but it's not true.
But I just have not seen that. I haven't seen that pushback.
Yeah.
It's always, this is nonsense. Really? Have you met people? Have you talked deeply to people about how it is that they form ideas and plan to make things or plan actions?
Yeah.
Like the differences, I imagine that we could discover similar differences and similarities in, for instance, how we wayfind and how we imagine navigating in the world. And there's clearly distinctions to be unearthed and discovered.
Yeah. You sometimes find it very disturbing if I'm driving and I take a way that is less efficient, even if it's only very slightly less efficient, and I may have chosen it for some other reason, you're like immediately like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And I also cannot stand having the voice give directions. It throws me. It makes me a less good, like I cannot tolerate it. And I think just having the voice come like, no way, no how, ever.
Well, I hate it too, but I don't hate it more than missing my exit because it was on the screen and I happened to be thinking about something else and not looking at the screen. And
anyway, to be continued, I expect.
Yeah.